When you think about our interconnected world, your mind probably jumps to the internet, right? Or maybe airplanes. But what if I told you the first true global network was forged almost 500 years ago, and it was all thanks to a single metal from a single mountain that tied the entire planet together for the very first time? Today, we're going to dig into how a literal mountain of silver created the modern world we live in. To really get a sense of the epic scale we're talking about, you just have to read the city of Potosi's own motto from its coat of arms. It says, "I am rich Potosi, treasure of the world, king of all mountains and envy of kings." I mean, wow, you gotta love the confidence, right? And the crazy thing is, as we're about to see, for a pretty long time, they weren't wrong. So how did silver even become the metal for money in the first place? Well, its journey as the world's favorite currency started thousands of years before the Spanish ever dreamed of sailing across the Atlantic. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's wild how long we've been using silver as cash. For thousands of years, from ancient Mesopotamia all the way to Charlemagne's Europe, it was the gold standard, or, well, the silver standard. But the key moment for our story, the real turning point, is right down at the end, in the 15th century. Min China's entire paper money system just collapses, and that creates this massive economic black hole and a desperate search for a stable currency, something real, and that something was going to be silver. So into this global demand steps the star of our show, the Spanish piece of 8. This single coin, because it was minted with a really consistent weight and purity, became the planet's first truly global currency. It was so trusted you could spend it anywhere, from Manila to Madrid. And get this, it was actually legal tender in the United States all the way up until 1857. It was, for all intents and purposes, the US dollar of its time. Okay, so if you're going to mint millions of these world-changing coins, you need a ton of silver. So where did it all come from? Well, the answer isn't in Europe or Asia. It's high up in the Andes Mountains, in modern-day Bolivia, at one single remote peak that was about to change the world forever. The story of how they found it honestly sounds more like a myth than actual history. The tale goes that in 1545, an indigenous man, Diego Guapa, was chasing a llama up the side of a mountain. Night falls, so he built a fire to keep warm. And when he wakes up the next morning, he sees that the heat from his little campfire had melted the very rock up beneath it into shimmering little rivers of pure silver. He'd just accidentally stumbled upon Cerro Rico, the rich mountain. And I really need you to try and wrap your head around this number because it is absolutely staggering. This wasn't just another silver mine. For half a century, this one mountain produced an unbelievable 60% of all the silver mined in the entire world. It was, and I mean this quite literally, a mountain of money. And you know what happens when there's that much money, right? People come running. Out of this barren, high-altitude desert, a city just boom, explodes into existence. Potosi's population swelled to over 200,000 people. That made it bigger than London or Paris at the time. It was a bustling, chaotic, incredibly rich city, one of the first truly global cities on the planet. But, having a mountain of silver is one thing. Getting it out of the ground is a whole other problem, especially once all the easy-to-reach, high-grade ore is gone. The solution involved a brilliant technological leap and a human cost that is just unimaginable. In the beginning, they could just smelt the super-rich ore in simple furnaces powered by the wind, but that stuff ran out pretty fast. The real game changer was a new technology called mercury amalgamation, also known as the Padio process. This was basically a chemical revolution. It allowed them to pull silver out of much lower-grade ore, and that unlocked the mountain's true, massive potential. So here's how this ingenious but deadly process worked. First, they'd crush the ore into a fine powder. Then they'd mix it with water, salt, some copper sulfate, and the key ingredient, mercury, to make this thick paste. This sledge was then spread out in a big courtyard, a padia, where workers would just stomp on it with their bare feet for weeks. The mercury would chemically latch onto the silver particles. Finally, you heat up that mixture, the toxic mercury turns into vapor and floats away, leaving behind almost pure silver. Now, a massive industrial operation like this needed a massive workforce. To get one, the Spanish took an old Incan labor system and twisted it into something far more brutal, the mita. This became a system of forced labor. the colonial government would conscript thousands of indigenous men, sometimes from villages hundreds of miles away, and force them to go work in the mines and refineries of Potosi. And the conditions were just horrific. You're talking about working at over 13,000 feet, breathing in poisonous mercury fumes and sharp silica dust all day. Countless workers died from pneumonia, from accidents, from mercury poisoning. It's no surprise that the indigenous laborers had their own name for Cerro Rico. They called it the mountain that eats men. So, who got rich from all this death and suffering? Well, the way the wealth was split up is pretty sickening. The Spanish crown took its royal fifth, about a quarter of all the silver. The mine owners and the merchants who shipped it, they took the biggest slice of the pie. And the laborers, the actual men who were digging the silver out of the mountain, they got less than 1% of the wealth they created. So we've got this enormous river of silver flowing out of the Americas. But why was it so important to the entire globe? Well, here's the crucial point. As valuable as all its silver was in Europe, it was worth twice as much on the other side of the planet. The numbers here tell the whole story. In Europe, the price ratio between gold and silver was about 12 to 1. But in China, which was starved for silver, it was as low as 6 to 1. This difference is what economists call arbitrage, and it was the engine that drove this whole new global economy. You could literally double your money just by shipping silver from Europe to Asia. It's that simple. And that simple economic fact is what gave birth to the very first trade network that spanned the entire planet. This wasn't just a bunch of regional routes anymore. This was one single, integrated system connecting the Americas, Europe, and Asia. And it was all greased by constant flow of Potosi silver. I mean, just trace the incredible journey of one of those silver coins. It's mined in Potosi. It crosses the Atlantic to Spain. Then it gets shipped back across the ocean to Mexico, hauled overland to the port of Acapulco. From there, it takes a long, dangerous trip across the Pacific on the famous Manila galleons. And finally, in the markets of Manila, that Spanish silver is traded for the Chinese goods that Europe was obsessed with: silk, porcelain, and tea. All right, so let's talk about the aftermath. How did this absolute tsunami of silver permanently change the world? And what's its legacy today? The impact was profound and honestly really complicated. For Spain, all that silver paid for its giant empire, but it also caused insane inflation that eventually just destroyed its economy. Over in China, it completely silverized their whole system, making silver the foundation for taxes and trade, but it also made the Chinese government dangerously dependent on a foreign metal. It even pushed rivals like Japan to develop their own huge silver mines just to get in on the China trade. And what about silver now? Well, its job as money is pretty much over, but it's actually more critical to our lives than ever before. Silver has transformed into an essential industrial commodity. Because of its unique properties, like being the most conductive metal on the planet, it is now a crucial component in everything from solar panels to the smartphone that's probably in your pocket right now. So, when you boil it all down, the story of Potosi is really the story of the birth of our globalized world. It's what connected the continents and created wealth that was, at the time, unimaginable. But it was a system built on a foundation of brutal forced labor and just staggering inequality. And so the question this 500-year-old story leaves us with is a really modern one. What is the true price of globalization?